I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. On Friday, Customs and Border Patrol Commissioner Chris Magnus announced disciplinary action for the Rio Horse Patrol unit following an investigation. The investigation centered on whether agents used whips against Haitian migrants, thousands of whom were crossing into the United States. Magnus said that while the horseback agents under investigation did not whip the migrants, their actions reflected, quote, unprofessional or dangerous behavior. Take a listen to Magnus's full remarks.
My name is Chris Magnus, and I've been the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, commonly known as CBP, for the past 7 months. Now, throughout my confirmation process, and since that time, I have made a commitment to work towards achieving greater transparency and accountability within CBP. In doing this, I've received the support of the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. So, in the interest of transparency and accountability, today we're releasing the final report of the investigation into the Border Patrol's Horse Patrol Unit, HPU, activity that took place on September 19, 2021 in Del Rio, Texas. The events that were investigated occurred during a mass migration surge near the International Bridge in Del Rio last September, when approximately 30,000 migrants entered or attempted to enter the United States. The investigative report will be available on our website, but I'm sharing the key findings with you today. I'll also be sharing information about our investigative and disciplinary process, as well as the corrective actions we're taking so we learn from this incident and do better in the future. Now, before I discuss the results of the investigation, it's important that I'm clear right up front that the disciplinary process in this case is still ongoing. I have an obligation to preserve employees' due process and privacy rights, so I won't be discussing any proposed disciplinary actions today. I realize that this may not be what some of you expected, and I also realize that there are many rumors out there about potential sanctions, but this process is still ongoing, so it's appropriate that I not comment on it. For clarity purposes, it's important to understand that there are two types of investigations that can occur following incidents like this. The first type is a criminal investigation or review conducted by a prosecuting entity such as a U.S. attorney or a district attorney. And this is done to determine if there's a basis to charge someone with a crime. The second type of investigation, it's commonly referred to as internal or administrative. These investigations are generally conducted by an agency's Office of Professional Responsibility, and this is sometimes known as internal affairs in other law enforcement organizations. Administrative investigations determine if there were violations of an agency's rules or policies. They also provide a broader scope of information associated with an incident that can help an agency better address issues related to things like training, supervision, policies, and the like in the future. CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility, which is known as OPR, initiated this administrative investigation on September the 20th, 2021. This was one day after the incident involving the Horse Patrol agents on the banks of the Rio Grande River, close to this small community of Del Rio. Now, it's important that I am clear that OPR and its investigations are insulated from influence within and outside CBP, including the Department of Homeland Security. This means they don't even tell me what they're doing, and I certainly don't tell them how to do their job. In accordance with policy, OPR immediately referred this investigation to the DHS Office of Inspector General, OIG, since they have the option of investigating cases like this. The following day, the OIG notified CBP that it would not investigate this case, and they referred the matter back to CBP. Now, consistent with CBP policy, on September the 29th, 2021, OPR then presented the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for review and consideration of any potential criminal charges. After an extensive review, the U.S. Attorney issued their decision not to prosecute the case on March 11, 2022. Following the U.S. Attorney's decision, OPR completed its administrative investigation and issued its final report to CBP leadership on April the 11th. The CBP disciplinary process was then started on April the 19th. Now, I've read the 500-page investigative report, so I want to convey that this investigation was detailed and comprehensive. Investigators conducted over 30 interviews with eyewitnesses, including members of the public and reporters on the ground. They talked to agents involved in the incident, Border Patrol leadership, and other CBP officials. Investigators also reviewed video footage, photographic evidence from multiple angles, and an array of documents and training materials that were related to the incident, including Horse Patrol operations. I should note that efforts were made to locate and interview the Haitian migrants directly involved in this incident. Given, though, the thousands of migrants present and the challenging nature of the scene, these individuals could not be located. Later, however, several of these individuals filed a suit against CBP, and information from the filings is included in the report. Discussions are also ongoing with attorneys representing the migrants to make them available for interviews by CBP's OPR investigators. The investigation has several findings, which generally fall into three main categories. The first category is command, control, and communications at the scene. Horse Patrol unit personnel carried out an operation at the request of the Texas Department of Public Safety that directly conflicted with Border Patrol operational objectives. In addition, the Border Patrol supervisor who authorized participation in the operation did not obtain additional guidance from higher up his chain of command. Finally, Border Patrol agents used an unmoderated and unrecorded tactical radio frequency, which contributed to some of the command and control deficiencies. The second category involved the use of the Horse Patrol units. Senior Border Patrol leadership elected to deploy Horse Patrol units that did not have appropriate training, supervision, and coordination. The horses involved in this incident were equipped with split reins, which can be twirled by the rider to guide the horse's movements. One agent involved in this incident reported twirling these split reins as a distancing tactic, but other members of the Horse Patrol program gave differing, inconsistent answers about whether twirling of split reins for any purpose was included in the agency's training. OPR's review of the Horse Patrol unit training documents did not reveal any specific guidance on twirling of the reins for any purpose. Horse Patrol personnel also gave inconsistent responses on whether they were trained or qualified to engage in crowd control. It is important to note that whips are not part of Border Patrol training or equipment. Likewise, OPR investigators determined that the agents involved in the Del Rio activity were not carrying whips. The third area focused on the individual actions of the agents. Despite initial appearances, after a careful review and analysis of videos, photos, and eyewitness accounts, this included an interview with a photographer on the scene and other members of the media, OPR found no evidence Border Patrol agents involved in this incident struck any person with their reins intentionally or otherwise. However, a determination was made that one agent acted in an unprofessional manner by yelling denigrating and offensive comments regarding a migrant's national origin and gender. This same agent acted in an unsafe manner by forcing his horse to narrowly maneuver around a small child on a slanted concrete ramp, which put the child's safety at risk. On multiple occasions, several mounted agents used force or the threat of force to drive migrants back into the Rio Grande River, despite the fact that the migrants were already within the United States. Despite the actions taken by certain agents during this incident, there was no evidence found that any migrant was ultimately forced to return to Mexico or denied entry into the United States. As a result of these findings, CBP convened a disciplinary review board, call it the DRB, made up of senior leaders from across the agency. This board received and reviewed all documents and materials related to the investigation. Based on their review, the board proposed specific disciplinary actions for 4 of the CBP personnel involved. Consistent with agency policy, these personnel have been notified of their proposed discipline and are being provided with all relevant investigative materials. Now, CBP employees are afforded due process rights, along with the opportunity to review the relevant materials and provide a written or oral reply. As I mentioned earlier, to preserve employees' due process and privacy rights, I'm not going to be discussing specifics of the disciplinary proposals today, but when it's appropriate to do so, we will make the final disciplinary actions public, consistent with the privacy rights of the individual employees. Now, one of my priorities when I took this job was to review CBP's discipline process to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability. That process is already underway, and I'm committed to working with Secretary Mayorkas to make progress on this goal. As Commissioner of CBP, I'm committed to addressing the problems and shortcomings identified in this investigative report. We're already taking steps to ensure a situation like what occurred in Del Rio doesn't happen again. We started working on several corrective actions and will continue to focus on them as we move forward. These corrective actions include establishing clear command and control practices for large-scale operations and assuring leaders fully assess field conditions before deploying Horse Patrol units or other resources. Reviewing and revising Horse Patrol procedures and training that includes prohibiting the use of twirling or spinning reins as a distancing or crowd control technique. Reviewing and updating training and qualifications for any crowd control activities. Forbidding deployment of these units for crowd control without commissioner approval. We're also reviewing legal training to ensure our agents understand their responsibilities and authorities at the border. In addition, will continue to review the overall disciplinary process and make needed reforms to ensure that it's both consistent and fair. These are just a few of the actions we're taking, all designed to improve how we operate. Look, the primary goal of this investigation was to establish the facts of what happened in Del Rio. It was thorough and independent. And despite any comments or criticisms, not everyone's going to like all the findings, but the investigation was comprehensive and fair. The situation in Del Rio at the time of this incident, it was chaotic and unprecedented. It's clear from the investigation that decisions made by some of the agency's leadership and the lack of appropriate policies and training all contributed to the incident. But there is no justification for the actions of some of our personnel, including unprofessional and deeply offensive conduct. Unfortunately, this incident overshadowed our agents' incredible humanitarian and law enforcement efforts in Del Rio last September. CBP personnel worked with other agencies and organizations to provide food, medical care, and critical humanitarian services to thousands of migrants in the area. This work, it almost certainly saved lives, and this is the kind of work our people do every day. I believe the CBP workforce is committed to doing the right thing, even under the most difficult conditions and circumstances. But there is no room in our agency for discrimination or intolerance. CBP is dedicated to ensuring the fair and just treatment of all people. Now, because we're a professional law enforcement agency, we're going to learn from this incident, and we will find ways to do better. So I'll now take some of your questions.
So we'll start first here in the room. Priscilla?
Hi, Commissioner. I realize that you're not going to share details on proposed discipline, but can you provide more specificity in terms of what that discipline is stemming from? What exactly are the wrongdoings that the discipline will come from? And then just another question. Part of this report includes requests from the Texas DPS. We know now that Abbott has released an executive order just yesterday authorizing GUARD and DPS to take migrants to the border. How is CBP responding to that?
Well, in response to your first question, although again, I'm not going to get into too many details of the discipline, the report highlights several areas that I've just covered, including some of the comments, some of the actions that were made by some of the individual agents on horseback that will be ultimately the basis for discipline. As I said, the process is still going on. There will be a deciding official who gets the recommendations from the Discipline Review Board, and they will ultimately make the decision about what the discipline is. And then, of course, the agents will have the opportunity to appeal if they so choose to, whatever the disciplinary findings are. Your second question was about the Texas governor's announcement to return migrants to the border. Is that correct? Look, we follow the law to secure our borders, and we have a shared interest with Texas DPS as well as other state officials in maintaining a safe, orderly, humane immigration process. This is consistent, in fact, with what we're doing in all the states along the border. We stand ready to work with Texas to achieve these goals, but the challenge is, when any state, such as Texas, takes unilateral actions, that just makes it harder for us to do this. So that's where we stand at this point.
Emily?
Yes, hi, thanks, Commissioner. On Texas, I mean, there was confusion over who to take commands from. Has that been resolved? Is it going to get more confusing with Texas being more involved in immigration enforcement?
Well, I think that's exactly one of the things that we're seeking to address as a result of this report. It should be clear that while we work with various state officials and state organizations like Texas DPS, our personnel take their direction from our leadership, from their supervisors. When that doesn't happen, it just causes confusion. It leads to all kinds of problems, including safety-related problems for everyone involved. So one of the things, again, that will come from this in terms of a corrective action is that all our supervisors and leaders in the field will understand what their role needs to be, and our agents will be clear that they need to take direction from those personnel.
We're going to go to the phone, and then we may come back after. So for the phone, first question.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 1 then 0 on your touch-tone phone. You may remove yourself from queue at any time by pressing 1 0 again. One moment.
Or perhaps more than one moment.
We will now go to the line of Nick Nirov with the Washington Post. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks for taking some time today, Commissioner. I wanted to ask, given the very strong statements that the President and the Vice President said at the time of this incident, including the President's promise that the agents would be punished, how is it possible for the OPR to conduct an independent investigation? Was there any? Did they come under any pressure from these statements?
So let me frame it a minute like this. I've been a police chief over the last 20-some years, and during that time, have certainly dealt with many high-profile controversies, incidents, things involving my officers that didn't look great initially. And it was inevitable, certainly not surprising, that there was going to be a reaction to that from the community, from those in the media, from elected officials, from different advocacy groups. Not at all surprising. But what I consistently did was make it clear to my equivalent of OPR that all of these things were to be put aside, to be disregarded. I was counting on them to do a fair, thorough, comprehensive investigation with no attention to any of this outside influence. I am very pleased that we have an Office of Professional Responsibility attached to CBP that is also very comfortable taking this kind of direction. When I spoke to them, I assured them very much the same instruction. I wanted them to be fair, thorough, and independent. They were to disregard anything they heard outside of their own work, and I think the investigation that you see that's been produced really shows that that's exactly what they've done. So I have a high confidence in their work, and I don't believe there's been any issues with outside influence.
We will now go to the line of Vanessa Croy. Please go ahead.
Hi, Commissioner Magnus. Vanessa Croy from KENS 5 out of San Antonio. I know you said you can't discuss specific with the agents in the disciplinary actions, but can you talk about the range of actions that would be for each agent? So, does that mean administrative leave? Will they be dismissed as an agent? And also, can you discuss the future of the Horse Patrol unit? Do you have plans to slowly dissolve them?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't really, again, speak to which specific kinds of discipline could be attached to different agents. Obviously, there is a range of possible discipline that goes from, reprimands all the way up to termination, but I certainly can't indicate which, if any of those, would apply to the agents involved in this incident. But there will be that information made public at some point in the future when this matter has been resolved. In terms of the Horse Patrol, we recognize that horses are a very important part of the Border Patrol's work. They have to do their work in very rough terrain, in areas where a horse may be the only way they can access someone in distress or someone involved in a law enforcement part of their work. So I certainly have every intention of maintaining the Horse Patrol, but I think what we're looking at is, are there other areas where Horse Patrol may not be best suited to do work? And some of those areas that we're looking at are crowd control. We're in the process of looking at this now, and we want to talk to experts in this area, other departments who are using Horse Patrol, but clearly this is an area that we're going to look at very carefully.
We will now go to the line of Yami Virgin, WOAI-TV. Please.
Yes, hi, Commissioner. How are you? You're not out here in the heat with us this time. 102 degrees in San Antonio. I had a question for you. I know you guys are dealing with a lot right now with the numbers surging. Are you guys looking into anything else with a higher technology to be able to help the border sheriffs as we're going through all of this issue right now, with our governor saying that he's giving orders to the National Guard to go ahead and pick up undocumented immigrants and put them back on the other side? We are doing stories out here on high technology things like Trusted Driver program out of San Antonio, where they can identify when people live in that area and they may not be the smugglers that they're looking for. Are you guys looking at anything at all to help the local sheriffs who are also taking the brunt of what's going on right now?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I sympathize with the heat. I certainly recall from my several trips out your way that it's pretty intense, and I'm sure at this time of the year it's even worse. No, I think we totally recognize the importance of continuing to utilize and advance technology that will be helpful to agents and their work in the field. And this is not just in the field, where we're talking obviously about various kinds of cameras, phones, aerial equipment, but it's also at our ports of entry, where there's really exciting things that are being put forward and that we're already seeing success with. But I think to come back to the issue of cooperation at a state and local level, we recognize that states are taking different approaches and strategies to dealing with the challenges as they see it, involving the large number of migrants coming across the border. Our goal is always to work cooperatively when we can within the law and based on what's appropriate under different circumstances with our state and local partners. I should say, in fact, let's expand it even a little further. Del Rio, the incident in Del Rio that we've been talking about today, is a perfect example of the way in which we rely on community to help us. We would never have been successful dealing with that number of migrants without the help of many, many people in the Del Rio community, including obviously our NGO partners, nonprofits, churches, the like. They played a critical role, and we see that as very, very important in all of these communities along the southwest border. So our intention is to maintain communication, to be listening to what communities need, to be as responsive as we possibly can. I certainly will continue to be coming down to the border, but this has to be a matter of cooperation, no question.
Okay, we'll take one last question here in the room.
Thank you, Commissioner. Nicole Skangas, CBS News. Just to follow up on earlier questions, Texas DPS solicited help from CBP in directing Haitian asylum seekers away from the river and toward the port of entry. To clarify, what authority does Texas have to enforce immigration law, and how would you characterize Texas DPS's cooperation with your investigation? And finally, what do you say to critics who say these findings came too late after promises from the DHS Secretary and the President of a swift investigation?
Well, I don't disagree that the findings took too long. I'm not happy about the length of time. And part of the frustration obviously involved the time that it took for the U.S. Attorney to make their decision about ultimately declining to issue any criminal charges related to the investigation. That was a little over 5 months. But I think our investigators associated, with OPR did a phenomenal job, and the complexity of what they had to go through in terms of video, photographic evidence, interviews, other kinds of documents. I think they did very well considering all of that evidence that they needed to look at. So these investigations, particularly ones that have this complexity, never go as quickly as you'd like. But frankly, each time we have an investigation like this, we learn something. And I think part of what we learn is how maybe we can be a little more efficient and expedient in getting things done, because we know it's hard for any of the agents involved.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.